Well, we saw them in the books, the targets to get to single-digit inflation. But maybe I must confess that I didn't think that I would live to see inflation getting to these current levels that we are recording as a country. But what has gone to these numbers? And does inflation actually mean that prices are dropping or they are reducing at a slow pace? On PM Express Business Edition, we're going to get some deeper understanding into what goes into the calculation of Ghana's inflation rate and whether what we are seeing on the market now is reflective of what is happening or not. You heard expressions like inflation EBD, and also what about the fact that it is slowing down, but that is not what is happening on the market. On PM Express Business Edition, look at Ghana's inflation rate levels, a myth or a reality, and understanding the current levels that we are seeing on the market. Indeed, I'm privileged to host the government statistician, Dr Alhassan Iddrisu, who is my guest on PM Express Business Edition. Doc, thank you for your time so much. It's been hard to try to get you to sit down for this discussion. Finally, we had it.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, for a lot of us who followed your work, you were at the Ministry of Finance, and now you are as a director there.
Yeah.
And I know that you moved fiscal, and maybe you help us what you are doing there. But for you, how would you describe your movement from the Ministry of Finance to here as a government statistician, knowing the work that you are doing there, and now you're more restricted to just the numbers and releasing it to us, Doc?
All right, thank you very much, George. And let me start by first thanking you for giving the Ghana Statistical Service the opportunity to talk to the entire Ghanaian population and also the entire world about the work that we do. We are very grateful for that. And I want to wish our viewers very well and to also seize the opportunity to listen to us so we can have deeper meaning into the work that the Ghana Statistical Service does. George, I would just say that my movement from the Ministry of Finance to the Ghana Statistical Service, I see it as just one mission. So in other words, there hasn't been any change of purpose. And I'll tell you why. No change of purpose because at the Ministry of Finance, my main responsibility was to undertake policy analysis, look at options or alternatives, advise government so that that advice can influence economic management that would result to improvement of the economy to better the life of Ghanaians. So that's basically the work I was doing there. At the Ghana Statistical Service, the work we do here at the end of the day is also about development. So in terms of big missions, at finance, you are looking at development. At the Ghana Statistical Service, you are looking at development. Having said that, there are some changes or there are some differences. Of course, at the finance side, we are looking at policy advice, policy formulation, and all that, all of which should culminate into improving people's livelihoods. That's what you do there. So it's basically policy formulation, policy advice, policy implementation. At the Ghana Statistical Service, which will influence development, but the Ghana Statistical Service is not about policy formulation, and it's not about advising on policy, but it's about generating data that is needed for effective decision-making to influence development outcomes. So in each of the two sides, there is national development there. The other side, what you are doing is that you are actually using data to actually do policy analysis and advise on macroeconomic management that will support national development. At the Ghana Statistical Service, you actually move from the using of data to being the creator of the data yourself. So in other words, our responsibility is actually to generate the data that the policymakers need. But it's not even restricted to just the policymakers. You generate the data that all actors of the economy need so that they use that data to take informed decisions that will support national development. So it goes way beyond policymakers. So you're talking about business people, you're talking about households, you're talking about NGOs, you're talking about civil society organizations, you're talking about the media. So your responsibility is to make sure that you have all of this data generated. Put it in a way that that data can be used, so that when the data is used, that data can inform development. So to summarize on this, I must say that we are very much interested in every aspect of the data value chain, from the production of data to the processing of data, to the analysis of the data, the use of the data. Data produced when not used is very useless, and it can't influence development. And so one of our responsibilities is to make sure that we don't just produce and disseminate the data, but then the data is used to make informed decisions that will support national development. And I must say that I have an amazing team at the Ghana Statistical Service that is helping us execute this job. And you know, the job we do here is very demanding, but we are very happy to do it, because at the end of the day, we are dealing with human beings. We think that we are serving people. We think we are serving human beings, just with the purpose of ensuring that we can improve their livelihoods. And we are the center of such an objective. We are so proud about it. I also want to use this opportunity to actually express my sincere appreciation to His Excellency the President for appointing me to this position. I must say that when I came in at first, of course I understood the enormity of the job at hand. Your
office was just a few meters or walk across the building.
It was few meters.
So I would say that you appreciate the workings and the happenings at this statistical service, I must say that.
Yes. In fact, I must say that I've actually been a board member of the Ghana Statistical Service before, so this is not the first time I have dealings with the Ghana Statistical Service. But apart from that, even as a director at the Ministry of Finance responsible for economic strategy and research, my work was closely linked to the Ghana Statistical Service as well. So I had a very good relationship, you know, with the service. So it wasn't difficult at all to ensure that the experience that I gathered at the public service was then brought to bear on the work I would do at the Ghana Statistical Service.
Okay, it's one thing producing the data, another thing also ensuring that policymakers work with it. Has your past role at the Ministry of Finance been very critical now to ensure that one of your key anchor ministries, that's the finance, implement what you put out, shaping the budget, shaping policy planning, and ensuring that if there are loopholes in certain areas, GRA Bank of Ghana quickly moves? And therefore, you've been there before. I believe that you can just walk to Honorable Minister of Finance office without seeking for an appointment and ensure that we have this data, this is what data is saying on the ground, let's implement it, let's make it work.
Good question. Look, I'll use 3 terms to describe my experience so far. In fact, my 1 year or so experience at the Ghana Statistical Service, I would describe it as being intense, I would describe it as being humbling, and I also describe it as being very, very meaningful. And the last word I use, meaningful, actually responds to the question you're asking with regards to the work we do and how stakeholders use the work that we do. I must tell you that for us, government is a big stakeholder, but government is not the only stakeholder. So we have government that is looking for our data to use every second. We have the public, the whole entire public sector that is entire public that is looking for our data to use. We have the business community that is looking for our data to use. We have development partners that is looking for our data to use. Remember that we're all chasing the SDGs, that's the Sustainable Development Goals, exactly. And we have to build data to be able to do that. So it's been intense because if you look at all of these data users, and all of these people are looking for information, that's a pressure on the Ghana Statistical Service. But we take that pressure in good faith. We take the challenge, and we make sure that to the best of our abilities, we are providing, we are producing and providing as much data as possible. Of course, financing becomes very, very important because you need money to do all of these. And so, fortunately for us, we have the Ministry of Finance, that's our mother ministry, that is providing financing. In fact, if you look at the 2026 budget, a very significant budget was provision for the Ghana Statistical Service compared to previously. That shows that the Ghana Statistical Service is being prioritized.
Am I be right to say that you, together with your board, played a critical role in this?
Yes, I must say that the board did an excellent job. I give the credit to the board, but also because we were able to convince the ministry, and particularly the finance ministry, about the essence of data, you know, in economic national development. And I think he sees the benefits. And so when we met him a couple of times, he was able to listen to us, and then he made some very great provisions for us in the budget. So this time, it's not only development partners funding for our programs and activities, but also funding from the national budget to support our programs and activities. And one of the innovations we have brought on board is to make sure that when we produce the data is well understood. So if you check the way we do our business of late, we spend a lot of time trying to simplify the meaning of the findings or the data that we generate. That's very important to us, because for us, statistical literacy is number one. If you produce the data and people don't understand it, they will not use it. It's only when they use it, and then the use of the data results in development, that you know you've arrived, right? So statistical literacy becomes very important to us, and so we try to explain what we do or what the numbers mean so that people can use it. But apart from that, we've also started engaging key stakeholders. We've engaged the minister and his team in many fronts. In fact, we do that directly, and we also do that through what we call the EPCC. That's the Economic Policy Coordinating Committee, which is a quarterly meeting which is co-chaired by the minister and the governor, and the government statistician is a member of that EPCC. So we engage at that level, we engage at the ministry level, we engage at the central bank level. So one of the things we've done is that when we produce the statistics, or we do the survey and analysis, and we come up with the findings, we're able to offer recommendations purely based on the data. We are not supporting a certain policy, or we are not going against a certain policy per se, but we use the data to provide recommendations from what the data is giving us as findings, so that those recommendations can support national development. And I must say that we are happy that so far, the recommendations we've given on CPI, that's inflation, the ones that we give on GDP, the ones that we give on surveys we do like poverty and employment. We just released a food security report today. Some of them we've seen are being implemented. In fact, if you look at the 2026 budget, you will see that there's been a number of recommendations we have given which are being absorbed by the budget and being implemented. Like, so let's talk inflation a bit. So one of we've seen that our inflation figures show, of course, there's been a very fast disinflation process in the past 1 year. I mean, in December 2024, inflation was 23.8%. If you move it to January 2025, inflation was still 23.5%. As we speak today, January 2026, inflation is 3.8%. So there's a very fast disinflation. So between January 24 and January 26, the inflation has reduced by about 19.7 percentage points, right?
Doc, sorry to catch you. I mean, we'll come to the proper details of the inflation thing. But I still want to backtrack a little bit about the data. I know that the law that establishes the service and all those things gives you some mandate and room. How difficult has it been for the service in gathering of the data that forms a critical component in everything that you do? We live in a country where data is seen as gold. Nobody wants to share the data. I mean, recently we had to, or in the recent past, we had to put together right information bill and all the rest. I know the statistical service comes at a different level, but how easy has it been for you, even with the state institutions and even for business partners, to release the data to the service, knowing that we would trust the service to use this for the purpose,
Yeah.
and even disclosing all the required data to aid your work.
Okay. Good question once again. Again, the way we collect data, we do it in a manner that it will be consistent with international standards. And I bet you, if you adapt those international standards, because effort and time have gone into studying how to ensure that you can collect data and collect it effectively and efficiently. So those are the standards. So, for example, Ghana has adapted the 10 principles of UN official statistics, which we observe.
Yeah.
So if you come to CPI, we've actually adapted the 2020 CPI manual for the 2020 IMF manual for CPI compilation and all that. All of those have nice principles which will help you collect the data in a very effective and efficient manner. Having said that, there are challenges, like you said. First, financing. The data collection, generation, analysis, processing, and disseminating business is not a cheap endeavor at all. It's very expensive. We have different types of data we collect. Some of them are administrative data. Some you have to execute surveys to collect the data, etc. Some of them you have to use actually technology like AI, geospatial technologies, etc. to collect the data. So it's not cheap. It's very expensive. And so with such a scenario, if you don't have people who will appreciate the work you do to provide the funding for that data collection, it becomes a challenge. And so if you check the Ghana story, you realize that for some time now, most of our data has been funded by donor funds, which is not sustainable. For the past 5 years, we've been implementing a program called the HISWA program with a number of other West African countries. It's been a very successful program, but it's World Bank funded. Of course, it's a loan we are taking from the bank, we'll pay back, but it's World Bank funded. That program is actually coming to an end at the end of this year. The question is, if the program comes to an end, that program was providing the funding that we were using to do all these services, etc. Where do we get funding to continue the good works that we are doing? Good news is the minister in 2026 has provisioned some good resources for us for the budget, but it's not just about 2026. It has to be 2026 and the medium term. What we do to address the financing issue is we continue to dialogue with government for us to be able to, for government to appreciate the work we do so that funding can be provided from the government level. But we know that for government to actually continue to fund us and to see the need for our data, we have to prove ourselves to be useful and relevant. And that's exactly what we are doing. So that's one side. But we also think that we shouldn't just wait for government to give us money. We have to be innovative. We have to change the rules of the game. We have to do things on our own to raise our own resources to be able to collect more data. And so we are doing a lot of things to make that happen. But we need legislative changes to make some of these things happen. And so we are looking at the legislative angle. We are trying to review our act to ensure that we have some more room or powers to be able to collect or generate some resources. Compel
institutions and individuals?
Yes, exactly. I mean, all of it. In fact, look, there's a whole private sector there. There's a whole, you see, the private sector, if you take a bank or you take an insurance company, you take a manufacturing company, all of those people, look, we are in an age where without data you're in trouble. You need data to make decisions to get much higher turnovers, etc. So the data is needed. So the demand for it is there. It's just left with us as a Ghana Statistical Service to partner with these institutions, let them know exactly what is it that we can do. Let them know that if they weren't thinking about using data to influence their decisions, they should think about it, and we can partner to generate those data for them. And we can go into an arrangement and make some money from there. There are many other initiatives we can do on our own to raise such financing. So that is in the pipeline. But that's not the only challenge. I mean, yes, we've been clothed with the powers to actually oversee the collection of data as Ghana Statistical Service, for the country. So we do that. But we have a bigger national statistical system that embodies the Ghana Statistical Service plus other institutions that are also collecting data. Like we have administrative data being collected by institutions like Ministry of Health, like NIA, like National Health Insurance, Bank of Ghana, etc. You understand? All of them, even the Ministry of Finance, one way or the other, they collect some data. So our role as the coordinator of the National Statistical System is to ensure that even if some other institutions are collecting, they're actually regulated within the statistical space in a very standardized way, so that data that they collect meets standards and can be used by all, to do their. And it's not an easy exercise to convince all of these guys, to work together with the Ghana Statistical Service to do the right thing. But we are making some important strides. I can tell you that as we speak now, we are getting ready to sign about 26 MOUs with MDAs, whom we have engaged all this while, so that we work together with them to provide the statistical capacity they require to be able to collect data. So that when they collect the data for you to use or for another stakeholder to use, that data will be quality data that can actually be used to make informed decisions. So we're actually bridging, that gap.
I mean, Doc, you've highlighted some challenges in what you've explained to me.
Okay.
But how does these challenges impact on what some would say data integrity?
Yeah.
So that when the Ghana Statistical Service says that this, we all can go to sleep. Okay. How has all these things been able to impact on the integrity of the data that you put out? Some withholding vital data, the collection of data, the independence of the service, the partiality in analyzing this data. We don't care what anyone will say. If this is the data, this is the data.
Great. So, I use a term that is humbling, to work at the Ghana Statistical Service. I use that term. I said it was intense, but I also said that it was humbling. You know why I said that? It's because you're a service that is collecting data, numerous data, in fact, large volumes of data, using thousands of data collectors to collect data, collecting thousands of data points on variables like prices, etc., conducting large surveys. Sometimes we even conduct census to deal with the whole population. You understand what I mean? And if you have to collect data of this magnitude, you sure must have a standardized way of doing it. Otherwise, you will not be successful. Otherwise, the integrity question you're asking would actually pop up. The credibility question, etc., will pop up. So what we have done at the Ghana Statistical Service is to make sure that we are using international standards. Like I said, the 10 UN principles of official statistics, we've adapted all of it. Like I told you, the 2020 IMF, ILO, OECD manual for compilation of CPI and inflation, we've adapted it. And how do we do that? So usually, before we go and collect the data, for example, if it's a survey, we engage ourselves in designing the survey. So we design a survey here, making sure that all the relevant questions are asked in a very professional manner. After that, you pre-test the survey to be sure that it is in good shape, and then it will give you the results that you need. After that, you hire people. You train them, because you don't want people to go to the field to bring you, bad data. So you train them with regards to the type of data you want them to collect, how they do it, etc. They collect the data, they bring it back, and then you have technical officers who actually monitor the collection of these data on the field. And it's all about this integrity. So all of these are systems that we have documented, which we use to collect the data. So when they do that, they monitor, they supervise the collection of data. The data is then brought back to office. Even when the data is brought back to office, the number of quality checks that we do. So we do these quality checks, we subject them to validation at different levels. First at the technical level, then it comes to management level until the data is cleared. Even when the data is cleared, we have to do analysis and we have to disseminate the data to the public. And in doing that, we make sure that all the consistency checks have been done. If there are outliers, they are addressed, and all that. And then even the dissemination, we're extremely careful, because as I mentioned to you, we want to be sure that once data has been collected, it is disseminated in a manner that everybody understands. So these days, we don't just come to release numbers. We release the numbers, we follow it up with some infographics, we do some short video, like 5 minutes video, to explain in very simple language, and that's done by the government statistician, what the whole survey is about, what the results mean, the implications, for each actor, whether it's a government, it's household, the civil society, etc. And if we have the need for some recommendations, we give the recommendations. It's a very short video, maximum 5 minutes, so that people can understand, the work we do. People will not run away from statistics or data, and then they can use the data to make informed decisions. And I must say that so far, so good.
Indeed, so far. So we'll be coming to more of a deeper understanding of the whole inflation thing as well.
Right.
This is PM Express Business Edition, engaging the government statistician as we try and get some deeper understanding of the current inflation levels, whether indeed it reflects the market situation on the ground, or maybe it's a different thing altogether. Engaging the government statistician, Dr. Alhassan Iddrisu. This is PM Express Business Edition. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition, as we have a discussion on inflation, the current inflation levels, understanding what goes into the inflation numbers and whether indeed it reflects the current situation on the ground, or maybe we all need some education about how it's done. Doc, help me out. I mean, as an economist, for some of us a little statistics and economics we did, they were just at the school level. Do you think that as a country, we have gotten this whole inflation thing misunderstood, looking at the current debate that is going on right now about it not being market reflective, and there's even a whole argument sometimes about inflation ABD. Help us appreciate the situation in terms of the understanding about the inflation, the 101s, whether it's the rate of increase, decrease, disinflation, and all those things. But help us in terms of the debate about whether we have gotten all wrong, including George Wiafe, about telling the story about inflation.
All right. Okay, so I wouldn't say that we've gotten it all wrong. I mean, but I think I would say that there's a lot of misunderstanding, about inflation. And that's why every opportunity that the Ghana Statistical Service gets, would like to be part of the process of ensuring that we are providing education or sensitization to stakeholders with regards to what inflation means. And not only inflation, any other work that we do. But you see, when you talk about inflation, one of the reasons why there is such misunderstanding surrounding the concept is that I see people confuse price levels with price changes, with cost of living. When you begin to do that, that misunderstanding will persist. And I'll take my time to break them down. There's a difference between price levels, there's difference between and price changes, as well as cost of living. What do I mean by that? Now, George, me and you will go to the market every day to go and buy some goods and services. I know you like kinke a lot, so you buy kinke and fish. You buy bread to drink your tea in the morning and all that, right? So when you go to the market to buy bread, let's say bread is 10 Ghana cedis, or whatever price bread is, or 20 Ghana cedis, let's say 10 Ghana cedis. That's bread for you. So that's the price of bread. That's the price level. So today you go to the market, bread is 10 Ghana cedis. Tomorrow you go to the market, bread is say 11 Ghana cedis. And then you go to the market another time, it is same 11 Ghana cedis. So you see what is happening. The price has changed slightly, but that's the 10 Ghana cedis, 11 Ghana cedis is a price level. But look at it this way. You are in Accra. You go to the market, you buy the bread at 10 Ghana cedis. Somebody is in the north, let's say in Tamale. The person goes to the market, possibly the same type of bread, he buys it at say 12 Ghana cedis. It's possible. So your bread is what? 10 Ghana. His bread, the same bread, 12 Ghana cedis, right? Meanwhile, your bread, that is 10 Ghana cedis today, yesterday was say the same 10 Ghana cedis. So for you, the price of bread hasn't changed. But for that person, yesterday, the price of bread was 10, but today it is what? 12. So for that person, the price of bread has what? Has changed. We are talking about the same commodity, not two different commodities. Bread. You get the point I'm making? That person whose bread price has increased will probably say somewhere when you say, oh, Charlie, we are seeing the prices of bread come down. Let's say somebody say price of bread is coming. Say, what are you talking about? The price of bread hasn't come down. I just bought bread. It is what? 12 Ghana cedis. So what are you talking about? So that's where the confusion is. And we are talking about price levels here, levels of prices. You get the point I'm making? Yeah. And the reason why there are differences is because of our location. So for you, you are in Accra. And for that person, the person is in Tamale. A lot of reasons could account for why the price of bread there is probably what higher. Maybe the input cost, transportation cost, etc. You get the point? Yeah. So one item, two different dimensions. So I don't usually want to say people have gotten it wrong. People are expressing their what they are observing at a particular point in time. But what I want to add is that there is one institution in Ghana which has been clothed with a mandate to collect all of these prices across all 16 regions. In fact, they go to 57 markets to do that. And those 57 markets, have more than 8,000 outlets. And they hire people, they go nationwide to collect the prices. So that institution is able to tell that, the price in Accra of bread you bought was 10, but in Tamale it is what, 12. In other place it was what, 6. That one institution is able to have all this information, these price levels at a certain point in time, all this information. So that institution is able to bring all the prices together. You don't have the benefit of that. Another individual doesn't have the benefit of that. Another institution doesn't have the benefit of that. The institution that has the benefit of that is a Ghana Statistical Service. So it brings it together. So that institution is more capable of telling you that if you put all of these together, the average price is this. So when you come and you say that, well, you are saying the average price is this, but my price is not that. In fact, I'm not going to tell you that you are wrong. Your price is not that, that's true, but because we are talking about your localized area at a certain point in time. But I'm dealing with collecting the prices across the whole country and over a period of time within a month, in fact. That's what I'm dealing with. So those are the price levels. Then price changes. So price changes, look, I'm dealing with the price of the item, the same item, but between two periods. So like I said, it was 10 now, it's probably moved to say 15. So it has increased by some percentage, right? From 100 to 150, it has percentage change. So it's moved by say 50%. So that's what percentage change, right? 100 Ghana to 150 is moved. But it could also move from 100 Ghana to what? 105. That's 5%. In each cases, there are what? Percentage increases. But in each cases too, the percentage increases are what? Positive. So there's increase. So when we talk about inflation, inflation is the rate at which the general price level increases. That's inflation. The rate at which the general price level increases. So as long as your inflation figure is positive, it means that the price level is what? Increasing. In fact, when you calculate inflation, there are three possible outcomes. You can either have a zero figure, which means that the price level hasn't changed, it is what it was before, or you can have a positive figure, which means that the price level has what? Increased. Or you can have a negative figure, which means that the price level is what? Has decreased. So when the price level, you do the percentage change and the price level increases, that's what we refer to as inflation. If you do the percentage change and the price level is negative, that's what we refer to as a deflation. You understand what I mean? And if you do the changes and the price level has come down but it is still positive, that's what we refer to as disinflation. In other words, the rate at which the general price level is increasing has slowed down. So that's what we refer to as what? Disinflation.
You think that this has cost service? Sorry, you're making a point.
Yeah, last point I want to make is cost of living. Sometimes somebody would say that, well, the Statistical Service has released inflation. They say inflation has reduced from 23.5% in January 2025 to 3.8% in January 2026. 19.7 percentage point reduction in inflation. But I haven't seen prices reduce. First of all, the Statistical Service, when we report inflation to be positive, we are not saying that prices have reduced. So 3.8% inflation, all it means is that between January 2025 and January 2026, the general price level, when we put all the prices together, the general price level has increased by 3.8%. I must say that that increase of 3.8% is an average. In fact, it's a weighted average. I'll come to how we compile the prices, but it's a weighted average. It's average because you have 307 items in the CPI basket, some of the items the prices of some of the items are what? Are going up. Yeah. In fact, others are doing what? Are coming down. Yeah. So when you put all of it together, that's the 3.8%. So it is perfectly normal for somebody who is consuming some items in a basket whose prices are increasing, even more than the 3.8%, for the person to think that, oh, but you are saying inflation is 3.8%. I mean, the items, when I go to the market, I think it's more than 3.8%. The person is possibly consuming items whose inflation, whose prices in the basket have increased more than the 3.8%. So the same, you can have an individual whose items that are consumed by that individual are among the ones whose prices are what? Are decreasing. So if you go to such an individual, in fact, if you put the two individuals together, they'll be arguing all day. Exactly.
But do you think that the service itself over the years, and not just since you came in also, should take part of the blame in terms of how the story has been told about deflation, the disinflation, inflation and all the rest, and how it's been communicated? Because then if you're talking about general price levels, or even as the media in telling the story, maybe expressions like it has slowed down, the rate has decreased, then inflation has dropped. We are all to be blamed for this current debate, and not just today. It has always been like that.
Yes, George.
That we are struggling to get people to appreciate these things.
George, I'll be the first to appreciate the point that you are making, that in fact is a responsibility of the Ghana Statistical Service to ensure that when we collect data and we disseminate the data, it's a responsibility for us to provide an avenue for people to understand the data that we collect. So it's our responsibility. So there's no way I'm going to say Statistical Service is not part of this blame. We should do more. In fact, we should ensure that we're actually putting in place systems, sensitization programs to educate the public more on what these things mean and what we can use the results for. It is for that reason that if you check from May of this year, we've actually enhanced the way we communicate. And let me come back to inflation. From May this year, we introduced what we refer to as contribution.
Was it May last year or May this year?
May last year. May last year. From May last year. May, June, we introduced for the first time in the history of the service, in terms of communicating inflation, we introduced what we refer to as contribution to the drivers of inflation. So we're able to tell you that inflation is this, but these are the things that contributed to inflation rates. And we're able to tell you the magnitude of the contribution, right? So that's when we came to we made people come to the realization that the fact that an item is registering very high inflation rate does not necessarily mean that it is the item that is contributing most to inflation. For all you know, the weight of that item may be too small to contribute to inflation. So you may have an item whose inflation is not that high, but that's contributing significantly to inflation because the item has a big weight in the inflation basket. If you take Greater Accra, for example, in fact, it's among the regions that record relatively low inflation rate. But it has a huge weight. Greater Accra has a huge weight. So because of that, the contribution of inflation to Greater Accra's inflation to the overall inflation is high. You understand what I mean? So we introduced that for the first time in May, June. And since then, we've been reporting that. That's number one. Number two, what we have also done is to make sure that to be able to explain better the drivers of inflation, we've been able to disaggregate the inflation drivers into goods and into services. Again, we never did that. But it's all geared towards ensuring that we are providing more clarity to how inflation is understood. Number three, in the past, we'll do a PowerPoint presentation, we'll do a release, etc. But we didn't have infographics. And now we develop very smart, sharp infographics that will give some very simple explanation to what inflation means. Number three, We used not to have this 5 minutes video that I told you about. Every single release, not only inflation, every single release that the Ghana Statistical Service releases, we spend time to ensure that we communicate the release in a very simple, non-technical, through social media handles, non-technical way for people to understand. And we are getting very good feedback from all stakeholders who use, those products. And then we've also introduced average inflation. We used to just report end of period inflation, but we've introduced average inflation. And it's an important indicator because for those who use flow variables, right, you need average inflation to convert flow variables into some other indicators that you can use. So all of these innovations have been brought to bear to improve our communication on inflation and other releases that we do. But I must tell you that we can do better. And we are striving to ensure that every platform that we get, we educate people better on the outcomes of the surveys that we do, the outcomes of the analysis that we do, the data that we collect, so that with that, people can better understand the statistics we generate to use for informed decision.
And even in this communication, how we try to simplify the jargons and move away from the deflators and all the rest. Let people appreciate what we were talking about. But Doc, help me out again that a typical process in getting the inflation for maybe the month of January 2026.
Okay.
What goes into that process and the announcement of that numbers, whilst you try to simplify the process, shorten to it, help me appreciate these things away from what I read in the textbooks to the practicality on the ground. What goes into the gathering of that data, that basket, that final touches, and you agree that for the month of January, this is the inflation number, the average at the national level.
I'll tell you what goes into it. First of all, we use recognized international methodology to compile and disseminate inflation. So I want us to get that as a first
There's no
point.
Ghana standard for inflation.
I'm coming, I'll get there. So that international standard is what I refer to as the IMF, ILO, OECD, UN manual, CPI manual for compilation and dissemination of inflation, which has been approved by everybody else. It was done in 2020. Guess what? As soon as the IMF released it, in September 2020, Ghana developed its own technical manual, which we have published. So in that manual, we've adapted the international standard and we have outlined...
Published on your website?
Published on our website. We've outlined the processes and procedures involved in compiling inflation data, in processing it, in analyzing it, and in disseminating it. All of it is outlined in our internal document, or what we call the technical manual. Having said that, let's now talk practicals. How do we do it? That's a good question. First, we ask ourselves, if you are to collect, to calculate inflation, or to announce inflation on the prices of which goods? First question. So what is the basket of goods and services that you are collecting prices on? It's a very important question. What's the population of Ghana? 34 million people?
35.
A lot of people.
You are best to give me that answer.
34 people. You understand what I mean? And if you are to look at the prices of the goods and services that all of these people consume, and you have to look at all the goods and services, it's just so costly that you can't do it. But statistics is beautiful. All you need is to take what we refer to as a representative sample of goods and services that are consumed by what? Ghanaians. And you know how we get that? We have a normal survey that we call the Ghana Living Standard Survey.
Because I'll come to who determines that.
Exactly.
My inflation is different from
as I was saying. Exactly. Good question. So what we do is that we actually conduct a survey called the Ghana Living Standard Survey, where we collect data from households in terms of their expenditures, their consumption expenditures, what they spend money on, etc. We do that survey almost every 5 years. In fact, currently, we are finishing the 8th round. But the current inflation data we use is based on the GLSS 7, which was done in 2017, right? So we have all this data. And you know what? we take a representative sample of the items that these people consume. So we settled on 307 items, right? Ranging from food items to non-food items to, name them. So all of these 307 items, that's the first call. Second, then we attach weights. So we ask ourselves, these 307 items, are they all equally important to the individuals and households of Ghana? And the answer is no. If you pick a typical household, we're able to tell from the data what proportion of their income they spend on this particular commodity. If you take, say, food, we're able to tell what proportion of, and food has a very high weight on the average. So if you take electricity, what proportion of their income do they spend on electricity? So we're able to determine the weight. So that's the second stage. So remember, we've been able to determine the items that want to collect prices on 307. We have that. Second, we're able to determine their weights. And we got the weights from the GLSS 7, right? So we have the weights, and the weight must add up to the total weight of, say, 100. So that is done. After that, then we send our field data collectors to go to the field across all 16 regions of the country. And here we have 57 markets with over 8,000 outlets. So they move around in all these places across all the 16 regions, and they collect the prices on the 307 items, and they do that every single month. And we have about 130 people who do that every single month. 130 people.
Doc, sorry to cut in.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that
if
you consult someone like George Wiafe to gather your data for you?
Yes.
I don't take the money. I don't go and sleep somewhere.
Yeah.
End of the day, I know everything.
Good question.
I bring everything.
Good question. I mean, we have our own internal checks and balances, and then quality assurance we adapt. So before we recruit you as a market reader, right? We have to ask ourselves a couple of questions. What's your educational level? What's your experience? Can you do the job, etc.? So largely, we use our regional statisticians we are represented at the regions. And then we also use the statisticians at the local level. When you go to the MMDs, in every MMDA they have statisticians. So we use them as well. If that is not enough, then we recruit from the market. Even when we recruit you from the market, you know what we do? We train you. And then we make you sign an undertaking. And you take an oath of secrecy. That, look, I'm going to do this job for, Ministry, Ghana Statistical Service, and these are the ethics of the job. If I go contrary to it, A, B, C, D, they do all of that. But then you provide them with training. So you send them to the field. They go to the field, they collect the data. And then when they collect the data, I told you all 16 regions. The regional statisticians are the first checkpoints. First of all, we have supervisors who go to the field to supervise and monitor the work that these data collectors do, right? So it's part of the checks and balances to ensure that they don't bring us any bad data. Then the data goes to the regional statisticians. Then they do their first checks at the region. So when they do that, they'll be able to identify outliers, etc. And our manual, if you go to our manual, the manual tells you how to treat outliers, etc. So the work is processed there, and then they are brought to headquarters. When the work comes to headquarters, then we also use our systems and our computer systems, etc., to do further processing. And then after that, it goes through another level of ensuring that the technical team at GSS also does their checks. And then before it comes to management looks at it, and then they clear. But that's the third part, which is the price collection. Now, when we do the price collection, then we go to the issue of computing the inflation. And that's when we use a standardized methodology, largely the last price or the lower price index mechanism to compute the index. And then when we compute the index, then a price change will then give you the inflation rate. So that's the process that we use to compile inflation. Now, George, you asked a very important question. Now, and I said it earlier, that the Ghana Statistical Service has a benefit of collecting prices of all of these goods across the entire country. Nobody else has that benefit. So in fact, the Ghana Statistical Service is best placed to give you an average figure of the prices of all the items, goods and services that are purchased in the country. The most important thing is the goods and services, are they representative?
Yeah.
If they are not representative, there's a problem. That's why the standard practice is for every country to rebase their CPI every 5 years. And in fact, in the case of Ghana,
and I was coming to that about
you're coming to that.
What is
Yes.
what has been done in terms of
Yeah.
rebasing the year,
yes,
and even
Yeah.
the basket of goods
Exactly.
to make it market reflective.
reflective.
What is the current situation on that in
Yeah.
terms of rebasing the
Yeah,
basket,
correct. Yeah.
and then the base year effect as well on the current numbers that we are
Yeah.
working with?
So currently, like I said, the current basket is based on the GLSS 7, which was done in 2017. So the price, the weight base year, the weights are the importance that consumers reflect to on the goods or attack to the goods. So the current base year is 2018 in terms of the weights.
Yeah.
And then even the price base year was the same year, but in 2021 we had to do the price. We had to update the price reference year to 2021, just to reflect the other 6 regions when the new regions were created. So you have a price reference of 2021, but the weight reference is still 2018. So
When
you see
would
that
be, when
exactly.
would that adjustment be made when it
Exactly.
comes to
So in fact, we've started. So look, like I told you, we are using the GLSS 8 to do the updates. We've just finished collecting data on the GLSS 8. Our plan is that by end of 2026, we would have rebased the CPI, not only the CPI and also the GDP. So we are working very hard to ensure that by end of this year, we'll have our CPI rebased.
What would this rebasing look like? Because I want to quickly come to the question also about making sure that how reflective is this basket. Kojo Mensah 10 years ago, who was just a national service person, has now got to work at maybe Bank of Ghana, might have moved from eating regularly at home to doing the restaurant, the takeaways and all the rest. And looking at the population size and all those things. In terms of the rebasing, how would this address the basket of goods that are being assessed?
Exactly
from
that. Yeah.
Communication center to now even buying credit on the phone away from the scratch cards and all those.
I agree with you, George.
To make this basket more reflective and current in the consumption pattern. And
Let
all
me
those.
tell you how
Help
it is
me
done.
out.
Yes, I'm helping you out. So the last one we did was 2017. So that reflected the goods and services that were purchased by the consumer in 2017. But the most current one we have done, which is the GLSS 8, we just completed the data collection in 2025. So that data, the questionnaire was designed in a way that will collect data on goods and services that are consumed currently. So Kojo Mensah, who is now been employed at Central Bank or Joy FM, earning big salaries like we are earning, and is now able to shift to buy, very expensive stuff, etc. All of those, when we did the survey, would have captured that. So once we capture that, so we'd include that in the basket. In fact, we are not talking about 307 items to items in excess of 500. But because we are still doing the work, I don't want to give out figures. But just to respond to you that the basket is going to increase. So what it means is that we are going to have a new base year, both in terms of the price reference year and in terms of the weight reference year. The weight reference year is going to be 2025 because the GLSS 8 was collected in 2025, right? And then the price reference year is going to be 2026. And then the number of items in the basket is going to increase in excess of 500. And we are going to have all these data collectors go out to all 16 regions to collect the data, on these new items. Once we do that, it means that we now are able to pronounce on inflation figures that is reflecting the current pattern of consumption of Ghanaians.
And the economists will say all other things being equal by the end of this year. So mean that all other things being equal from January 2027.
That's our plan.
You will have a rebased
that's our plan.
Basket,
that's
a
our
rebased
plan.
year.
Correct. That's our plan.
In the accounts class, sometimes this theory is pushed out that this could change the numbers in terms of the computation and what we've been used to putting out. We saw what happened to GDP when the rebasing was done. Some are saying that it could also impact on the final output for the GDP and inflation as well.
In fact, we are not only doing a rebasing of the CPI, we are also rebasing the GDP. Because the last time we did a GDP rebase was also more than 5 years. And there's a reason why you collect this data. You collect the data to make informed decisions to influence development outcomes. If the data is outdated, if you're not collecting data which is reflecting current dynamics, then that informed decision will lead to wrong advice, and it will lead to what? Wrong development outcomes. You get the point I'm making? So in the literature, or per the standards, after 5 years, you rebase. In fact, if you can even do it much earlier, all the better. They're expensive, but you have to do that. Fortunately for Ghana, if you check our records, I think Ghana is one of the countries that regularly rebases, that regularly observes, these standards, etc.
One morning and we're a middle-income country.
Exactly. I mean, not that we just woke up.
I'm just saying that
time, but exactly. Yes. So this rebasing will take place. Good news is that when we do the rebasing, fortunately, we have a methodology that's able to provide backcasts. So in other words, we would have rebased using 2025 as a base year in terms of the weight, and 2026 as a base year in terms of the prices. But we have a methodology that's able to use the historical data that we have to still guide us in terms of the new rebasing to do backcasts. And so we're able to still make references to what? To previous inflation data. So we have the methodology to do that. Both in the GDP and then in the CPI.
But the caution here is that it could change the dynamics in whatever way you want to look at it.
Yes.
The GDP thing is a typical example about how the economy expanded. Now the argument about we are close to lower middle income status and the challenges it comes with, and even the whole argument about data and then reality. This is PM Express Business Edition, engaging the government statistician Dr Alhassan Iddrisu on understanding the inflation dynamics and debate and what is the reality on the ground and whether this computation is telling the issues on the ground or not. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we try to get some deeper understanding of how we calculate inflation and about all this current debate that is going on, but engaging the government statistician, Dr. Alhassan Iddrisu. Doc, I mean, what do you make of all these current arguments and content about what we are putting out? And even before I do that, I mean, as a statistician, are you surprised about the rate of decline that we were some years ago, a year ago, and what we are now? And yes, I knew about single digit being a target and all those things. But I didn't dream that a day will come where we have inflation around 3%, 2%, 1%, and even possibly a deflation. What do you make of this drastic reduction in the inflation rate? Putting on the cap as a statistician and not a government statistician.
So, but let me make something clear before I answer your question. The term government statistician actually is just a nomenclature for the head of the statistical service institution. It doesn't mean that you are working for government. When I say for government in quotes, in other words, it doesn't mean that government is you are an independent
like office in the UK.
Exactly, you are an independent institution mandated by the Statistical Service Act. We derive our independence from the Act, right? By the title is so because that is what is in the Constitution, and that's what the title. So you just like we have independent statistical bodies elsewhere. We've also been clothed with the powers to work in an independent manner. You understand what I mean? So don't look at the term government statistician and think that it is a statistician that's influenced. No.
An extension of the Ministry of Finance.
Or an extension of Ministry. No. It is an independent body The Statistical Service is established by an act of parliament, in fact by the Constitution first, and then by an act of parliament. And we derive our mandate from both the Constitution and an act. Now let me come back to your question, your substantive question. Whether I'm surprised about the speed with which inflation has reduced.
Some say it's quite abnormal.
Look, I am going to wear my hat as a statistician and an economist to answer this question. Am I surprised that the inflation rate has come down? My response is no. Am I a bit surprised about the rate at which it has come down? I'll say, well, yes, I didn't expect that the inflation rate should probably will come down as low as we are seeing.
Even the IMF didn't expect that.
Exactly. So it's about the speed. Yeah. It's about the disinflation process, the speed with which it has come down. But look, if you ask me, we collect data. We just go to the market. I describe the process to you. We collect the data. We tell it the way it is. So we just report what the data we get from the markets are. We tell it the way it is, without fear of anyone, whether it's government, whether it's central bank, whether it's the private sector or who. We just go to the field. We do our job using our ethical standard. We collect the data and then we report. But every single price you see is a reflection of actions or inactions of economic actors. That's what it is. You understand what I mean?
Yeah,
every single price you see out there, it is because government, civil society, the private sector, the media, all of you are actors. Everybody is an actor. Is doing something which is all resulting in what? The prices that we see. If you ask me to hazard a guess as to why we are seeing the disinflation process that we are seeing, I'll give 4 reasons. First, I would say it is reflecting the outcome of macroeconomic management. That's number 1. Number 2, I would say it is reflecting real sector movement or performance. Number 3, I would also say that it is reflecting global development. And then number 4, I would say it is reflecting some base effects. So a combination of these come together to possibly explain the disinflation process we are seeing. Let me start with the macro management. You know, at the macro side, we've seen government undertake massive fiscal consolidation. We've seen the exchange rate appreciate, responding to macroeconomic policy dynamics. That's at the macro level. At the macro level, we've seen the central bank operate in a manner that it is maintaining prudent monetary policy, tightens if there's a need to tighten, and then it loosens if there's a need to loosen. But it has so far maintained very firm, measured monetary stance in response to what the dynamics are looking at. So if you put all of these together with a very strong fiscal consolidation, with expenditures being rationalized and aggregate demand being tamed, it bodes well for the disinflation process. So to say, we can talk about the stronger CD that we witnessed in the whole of 2025, appreciation of around 40% or so.
So can we say that
yes,
the CD's strong appreciation over the past 1 year
has also contributed.
And also the Bank of Ghana's plan to mop up, an aggressive mop up of the liquidity in the market has contributed to what we've seen.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that not just the Bank of Ghana's mop up or the Bank of Ghana's monetary stance, but also the fiscal consolidation from the fiscal authorities, as well as the relative stability of the cedi or the appreciation of the cedi. All of those,
40%.
Yes, more than 40%. All of those have contributed. And the way the transmission mechanism is as follows: if you have your exchange rate appreciating, and you have your basket, the basket that we have, the current basket that we have, about 30% of it is imported. the items in the basket, 30% weight is ascribed to import, 30% or so is ascribed to imported items. So it means that if the exchange rate appreciates, all of these items, their prices will respond positively in terms of bringing inflation down. You understand what I mean? Even for the 70% or so that are locally produced, if they use inputs that are imported, their prices will do what? Their input prices would come down, and that will bode well for the disinflation process. You understand what I mean? Yeah, so if you put all of this together, the macro is helping. Now I talked about real sector. Now real sector, Ghana Statistical Service is able to distinguish or disaggregate inflation into food and non-food. In fact, over the 1 year period, which is January 2025 to January 2026, we've seen food inflation actually reduced from 28.3% to 3.9%.
That's a disinflation.
That's a disinflation.
Okay.
That's a disinflation. So that's a huge disinflation. And this is in response to better harvest, lower input costs, and improved food supply. You understand what I mean? If you take non-food, in fact, if you take all the disaggregations, whether food, non-food, goods or services, you take imported items or locally produced items, if you take all the disaggregation of inflation, they've moved from double digits to lower single digits in just 1 year, all of them. So that is helping significantly explain the disinflation process we have from the real sector side. Now, so that's the real sector. And then you look at the base effect. You recall that in 2022-23, thereabout, inflation increased up to like 50 point something, 54%, thereabout. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're right, Doc.
You know, so prices then were very high, right? Very, very high, reflecting a number of considerations. Now, if you have high prices, what we mean by base effect is that if you have very high prices and you make small efforts, you would see a fast disinflation process. So prices were very high then, right? So in that case, even if price increases, they're already high, the rate of increase is smaller until you have the disinflation process speeding up. So that's what we refer to as the base effect. And then I talked about the global dynamics. Global dynamics, we can look at it from the global prices themselves. I mean, the past 1 year, I mean, we've seen stable global prices. You remember the COVID time when the UK and then the US, they were registering inflation in the north of 8 to 10%.
Yes, globally, they are pointing to a slower disinflation.
But now we are seeing stable inflation rates, the 2%, the 2.5% thereabout. So it's been very stable. So you don't get to import those previously higher prices we saw during COVID to the country. Secondly, commodity prices. I mean, we know the impact of crude oil, I mean, to a country like Ghana, right? And we've seen commodity prices actually moderate, in the past 1 year. So what it means is that if you were importing those items into the country, crude oil prices, they've moderated, then that will bode well for inflation. So the disinflation we are seeing of around 20 percentage points in just 1 year, for me, is a reflection of all of these gains from the macro side, from the real sector side, from the global development side, and from the base effect. So if you put all of this together, that is what explains the disinflation process.
Doc, what do you tell those who look at these numbers, and even the February one being 3.8 or something, and they are questioning the data integrity, the relevance of this data being market reflective. And this is coming from not the normal street people, but people who we believe that they appreciate economics, they appreciate statistics, they listen at university levels and all the rest, and they are questioning this data about, we don't think this is the actuals on the ground. What do you tell those who are questioning this data that inflation at 3.8 and there are several extrapolations even saying that even by June it could hit 1% and all the rest, who are questioning all these things? What do you tell them?
Yes. So this is what I would tell them. The 3.8 inflation recorded in January 2026 is an average figure of prices of 307 items. In that basket, we've actually seen prices that have increased, but then there are also prices that have reduced. In fact, in our release, we're able to show prices that have increased and prices that have what? Reduced. Let's start with some of the prices, the items that saw price reduction. We saw garden eggs. We've seen garden eggs actually reduced by 58, recording 58.7%. What does it mean? I told you negative inflation means that there's a deflation. It means that if you take garden eggs, the prices of garden eggs reduced by 58.7% between January 2025 and January 2026. 1 year period. They reduced by 58.7%. If you took fried fish, the prices reduced by 50.7% over the same period. And here I'm talking about prices, the prices. You take kontomire or cocoyam leaves, the prices reduced by 49.1%. So the same for pawpaw, for fresh tomatoes, for fresh okra, for garbage, for carrots, for grapes, and for shea butter. But there are also prices of items that increased in the January 2025 inflation. In fact, if you take the first 10, the highest 10 items that saw, price rises. Take ginger. Ginger's price increased by 72.3%. So between January 2025 and January 2026, the price of ginger increased by what? 72.3%. Plantain, green plantain, increased by 67.9%. Charcoal increased by 53.7%. So the same for cashew, not in terms of magnitude, but cashew, cinema and cultural services, crab, palm fruits, avocado pear, and then pineapple. They also price what? Increases. But you know what? These are just 10 of the items that I just gave, whose prices what? Rose. And then the other ones I gave, 10, whose prices what? Reduced. There are 307 of these items. So we collect prices on all these 307 items across all 16 regions of the country, across 57 markets in all those 16 regions, and across more than 8,000 outlets. You understand what I mean? And we'll put it together and we'll use standardized and approved methodology to calculate the inflation, and then we report it as such as 3.8. Now, I try to explain that it is not surprising to me that just one individual would say that, look, for me, the items I've consumed, right, the prices have increased, and if I check my rate of increase, my inflation is more than 3.8. It's way possible to have that. That's not abnormal, because the person is looking at it from his or from her own perspective. It's not abnormal at all, because the person in his mind or her mind is looking at the basket of items the person is consuming, and for that person it has increased. So the same, you can actually have a person whose items consumed would see actually prices falling. So in that case, for the person, it's even deflation. It's not even an inflation. It's negative inflation. I don't know if you get me.
I get you.
Now, George, let me just take my time to explain, because that's a very important question. So all of these are played out. So individuals can have different opinions. I'm saying there is only one body in Ghana, which is the Ghana Statistical Service, that goes around all these markets, in all these regions, in all these outlets, to collect the prices. So, all other things being equal, an individual or a body that has not done this exercise cannot claim to have data which is better than the data the Ghana Statistical, especially when the Ghana Statistical Service is observing all the ethical standards. I just walked you through the processes we use to collect the data and all that. I don't know if you get the point I mean. Exactly. So I think there's a lot of illusion, and we should take our time to understand, how inflation is interpreted. Let me give you another example. Do you know that sometimes somebody's cost of living has worsened? Yeah. And because the cost of living has worsened, and you say, oh, inflation has come down. I say, how? But inflation has come down. So, but my cost of, you say inflation has come down, but my cost of living has worsened. So your numbers are not right. So I tell that person that, look, inflation is not cost of living. Inflation is just one of the things that goes into the computation of cost of living. There are many other things. You understand what I mean? Your cost, your assetinimu, you understand that? Price changes are part of it, but there are many other things that are also part of your assetinimu. Your income. For example, let's assume that inflation is coming down, but you are not employed, you're unemployed, you don't even have money. You understand what I mean?
That would obviously gives a different picture.
Yes.
Some members of parliament, I even asked them, come and explain to us, because we doubt these numbers. Are you worried by some of these comments?
Yes. Let me tell you, George, when I took up this position, I knew the enormity of the work that is ahead of me. And I knew that I was walking into a professional body. And I can beat my chest any day and say that I'm working with a team of officers at the Ghana Statistical Service who are very ethical, who are very professional, very hardworking, and who have worked and put in place processes and procedures to safeguard the integrity and credibility of the data that is collected. That's a system that I inherited. And it doesn't end there. We are even doing more. In fact, since I joined the service, we are doing more to improve our systems. We are doing more to ensure that we collect data in a faster way. We are adapting AI technology. We are using geospatial technology and other technology to improve the data space. When I see an MP or a member of parliament tell me that, come to parliament to explain or to engage us on inflation and other matters, I'm not worried. In fact, I'm happy about it.
Are you going? Has that invitation been extended?
Yes. No. We haven't seen any invitation. We are more than happy
to go to that committee level and
even if it is tomorrow. We are more than happy to go to Parliament to engage Parliament in a sensitization program on inflation, not only on inflation and the work that we do. And I must say, Parliament has been a great partner. In fact, last year, May or June, we actually had to visit the Office of National Statistics, ONS, in UK, just to understudy their statistical systems. And we did that with Parliament. In fact, we had the Deputy Speaker, the First Deputy Speaker, and both the majority and minority leaders in the trip. And it was a very useful trip. And as part of our partnership to ensure that, Parliament needs data, right? The work they do, they have to take decisions on the floor at the moment, and they need data to take informed decisions. And so Ghana Statistical Service is a great partner to Parliament. So we are working together. As part of the process, we've already done one engagement with them. We're invited by the Economic Committee of Parliament. Yeah, exactly. And to talk to them about the data we collect. I said, we've done that. We are more than ready to engage Parliament.
As we try and wrap up on this discussion, time is not on our, as our best friend. I come again with the question of data integrity. I mean, you're independent and everything. Someone said somewhere and said, Doc, I mean, to let us look good, can you do something to this data? Is that possible?
I mean, is that possible for somebody to say that to me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, George, you're asking me a question which I can't answer. I can't answer because I cannot know what you will tell me. Let me rephrase your question, then it will make sense. So if somebody comes to you and say, George, Alhassan, can you make the data better for us? So you should ask me. Don't ask me about what somebody will tell me, because I don't determine what somebody tells me. As for what somebody tells you, they can always tell you anything. Right? I'll answer the question from two angles. First of all, my experience as a public servant, and you can check my records. I don't have to speak for myself. Check my records. I mean, I've served at the Ministry of Finance for more than 27 years before I joined the Ghana Statistical Service. Check my records. I don't joke with professionalism. And I'm quite sure that both sides of parliament, because I've worked with all the governments. I've worked with MPP in power, I've worked with NDC in power, not once, many times. If I've worked 27 years, you understand what I mean? And in all of these times, I've worked in areas that are very sensitive. And I would not be surprised at all if all sides testify to my professionalism. I would be very surprised. I'm not saying it's possible. I'd be very surprised if anybody can even muster the courage to come to me that, oh, can you do ABC for the data to look good? Because they know the type of person I am. So that's the first point I'll make about this. Secondly, you see, institutional setup. When you're an institution, and that's what I always preach to my staff here, if you build a system around individuals, that system fails. But if you institutionalize processes and procedures, you have a very strong system, and that system will stand the test of time. You understand what I mean? What do I mean by that? So we have codified the way we'll collect our data, the way we'll process the data, the way we'll analyze and disseminate the data. We have processed our engagement processes with people. We've developed a quality assurance framework, which we use not only by us, by the entire national statistical system. We got it approved by the board, and we are finalizing that to make it available to the entire national statistical system. We've developed code of ethics for the entire national statistical system. Again, we are lucky to have our board approved it, and we are going to get that disseminated to all the players in the national statistical system. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So we've put in place processes and procedures that we follow to ensure quality of the work that we do. Because look, data, everything about data is credibility. The day you lose credibility about data, you are gone. And we are very mindful of that, and we protect that very jealously.
The factors that causes rally of data or disinflation last year hasn't ended, and they are still more present. The gold prices, the stability of the cedi. If I look at the Bank of Ghana, there are some who say that don't worry about even the current pressure in Q1. There are some who are also saying that the rally is not going to end anytime soon. The IMF itself has talked about a single digit this year. The IMF talked about 7%.
Yes.
The Ghana Association of Banks is saying 3% this year. Engaging some economists, they're even talking about it is going to go down further, even to 1% in June. And what do you make of all these credible data being put out by not just student economists, by IMF, Ghana Association of Banks, Bank of Ghana, about how inflation is going for this month?
Yes, okay. So I'll answer it from two angles. First, the Ghana Statistical Service is not in the business of projecting inflation. We don't do the projection, because you can't be a player and a referee at the same time. We collect the data, we tell you what it is. So we leave the projection of inflation to institutions like the Central Bank and the Ministry of Finance, and even the independent bodies like the IMF and then the universities, the academia, etc. They can all do their projections. We are okay with that. But we don't do the projection, because can you imagine if we were doing projection, we collect the data to say, well, we projected this, the data is this. It's conflict of interest. So we don't actually do the projection. But having said that, we collect the data, we're able to present it, we give the implications, we give some advice or recommendations if we have to, and that's it. Now, the question you're asking about, and people have asked, how about if
these current levels?
Exactly, 2 points, sustaining it, and even how about going into deflation?
Which is possible.
Which is possible.
Very possible.
Which is possible. But you see, my response to that is that that's why you have the managers of the economy. You have people who have been paid or employed to manage the economy. That's their job. You get the point I'm making. You have the fiscal authorities at the Ministry of Finance. You have the monetary authorities at the Central Bank. You have other players in the ministries who are working in the real sector. They have to work together to ensure that you observe an optimal rate of inflation that is internally consistent with your development objectives, macroeconomic stability and growth. That's very important. So in other words, yes, inflation is coming down. Question is, how do we sustain it? Good question. But also important is how do we ensure that it is not just sustained, but it is kept at tolerable levels. That's also very, very important. Because at the end of the day, you need inflation that will support your growth process. You don't need inflation that will be inimical to your growth process. Can you imagine if you recorded deflation in a very long period of time? You understand that?
Not good for manufacturing firms, not good for industries, not good
for
business.
Exactly. Because if there is deflation, the expectation, individuals will expect that, well, the prices are going to reduce further. So they'll hold on. They'll hold on consumption.
No, as you draw the curtain down and end this discussion, because time is not our best. We might do a part 2 of this, Doc. I've always been engaging Dr. Wiafe when he was alive.
Okay.
One of his concerns there was that, George, the statistical system or service, even at that time, they were putting out too much data outside. It has gotten, if I can use the expression, even worse now. You release the food security index, you are doing tourism, you are putting all this data out. GDP, quarter GDP, PPI. Some are saying that too much data. You are confusing some people.
George, you know something? Instead of using the word is gotten worse now.
Yeah, that's something quote. I mean,
yeah, I would prefer to use the word is getting better now.
Too much data.
Let me tell you,
Wiafe was complaining about
too much
information.
Let me tell you something, George. First of all, my opinion, and it will be the opinion of the Ghana Statistical Service, is that we even need more data. And I'll tell you why. Look, we live in an era that is increasingly becoming sophisticated. You understand that? We live in an era where you need data, in fact, by the minute, not even by the day. Look, we are producing GDP quarterly. Quite recently, we introduced a monthly indicator of economic growth. And so we're able to give you some indication of the performance of the economy on a monthly basis. You understand that? Look, you need, as a business operator, you need this information to make decisions to increase your margins. You need that. In fact, you even need that in shorter frequency. If you can get that weekly, why not? So the issue is not about too many information, but the issue is about how we use that information. That's very important.
The question about data integrity as well, when you have
and
too much data at the same time.
Yes.
The computation of it,
yes.
The measurement of it as well.
Yes. No. That's the point I'm making. I'm saying that the issue is not too much data, because I can bet you that we even need more data than we have now. Because you need all of the businesses need the data to make decisions. The policymakers need the data to plan the economy and to take it to formulate their development plans and to implement their policies, etc. NGOs need the data to know where they can target in terms of interventions they are making. I don't know if you get me.
Yeah.
So you need, after the data, you actually need more of it. So the question is not too much data. The question is the quality of data. The question is, what processes are you putting in place to ensure that the data you are generating can be trusted? The data you are generating is credible.
And you're doing
and
that.
We are doing that. And the data you are generating can actually serve the purpose for which you are generating the data, which is to produce quality, credible, timely data that would inform decisions to influence development positively. That's what we have to worry about.
Now, we have to do a part 2 of this GDP, population census, and even your business survey data that you're putting together and all that, because time is not our best friend, Doc, and this has been a PM. And I appreciate your time so much.
That's
and I believe that we'll come back for the second part of this discussion and discussing all those issues as well. You know, the debate will still be going on in your homes about how best can we capture the data, quality data, regular data, and let the statistical service be the reference point when it comes to data statistics in this country. This has been PM Express Business Edition. My name is George Wiafe. Have a great day.